Well, basically, I'm going to talk about my own answer. Okay, there are many different. So I talked about the three challenges of religion. There are three major challenges of religion. And so there are different ways of dealing with these challenges. And so at some point, though, I can lay out all these different challenges and different ways that different people are responding to them. But also, I'd like to show what I personally think about it. And actually, this is related to my own engagement in the Baha'i faith. So in a sense, how does the Baha'i faith look at these problems and how to solve them? I had posted a Medium essay on this, but I saw that very few people read it. So I'm actually going to go through the content of it. And then we might have a little bit of discussion on that. And then I'll go to, after that, then I'll go to really wrapping up everything that we've been doing in this course. So we started off with the operating systems, Mindscape. We went through so many different ways of looking at your Mindscape, different ontologies, different dynamics of religion, challenges of religion, different problems, different solutions. Okay, so now how do we bring it all together and how do we move forward, so to speak, right? So that I'm going to end off with that. And also I had also posted an essay on that too on Sunday, but also because only less than 20 people read it. So I'm gonna basically tell you I'm gonna tell you because it's really important. Okay, so we have to bring it all together. Otherwise, how does all this course fit together? This is really, really, really important. Okay. Because basically then it gives some pointers for you. So how do you trace your own life, after this? How do you deal with all these, how do you deal with all these issues? Of course, and it's all up to you. In the end of the day, it's all up to you. So, all right. So the challenges of religion. Well, first of all, we looked at some of these challenges, and then some of you said, all right, well, look, I mean, why not just abolish religion? Just get rid of religion altogether, or just ban it, make religion illegal, and then we just won't have any of these problems, okay? So that sounds like the most simple solution. And actually, there was a time when I was a university student, I actually agreed with that. I thought so. Religion was so stupid and just not blow it up, but well, exactly, that's the problem. How do you abolish religion? Not so easy. So the problem with that is you just can't do it. It doesn't work. Okay. So if we look at there actually been attempts to abolish religion. And actually, China is a very good example. So China actually banned religion completely. I mean, almost completely during the 1950s and 1960s, and then completely, totally banned from 1965 to 1970, around 1976, or basically till around 1979. Okay, so during the Cultural Revolution, so during the Mao period and during the Cultural Revolution, actually religion was completely banned in China. But actually the interesting thing is that so after it was all banned, and every kind of religion was banned, whether it was Chinese religion, even old ladies worshiping Guanyin, or Christianity or Islam, you name it, it was banned. But actually, after banning it for completely for 10 years and even very strictly for for 30 years, from the 50s to the 70s, well, after it just started coming back again. And the interesting thing is, if you look at, for example, Christianity actually started to grow very rapidly in China in the 1980s and 1990s. But actually where it really started to grow was during the time that it was banned. So there's something about religion that you just, because it's in people's hearts, and no matter what you do, you just can't get rid of it. You really can't get rid of it. And if you try to ban it, and another example is France, where France has never really banned religion, but it really tried very hard to kind of reduce the influence of religion as much as possible in society. But actually, I just saw yesterday there was news in France that actually actually military generals were very, very concerned about that religion was rising in influence in France. So it seems that no matter what you do, it comes back. And the other thing is, the more you try to ban it the more intensely you try to ban it, you have to create a substitute of religion. So actually that's what happened in the 1970s. There was the cult of Chairman Mao. So actually there was almost a religion of Chairman Mao at that time. So actually, in order to completely eliminate religion, you had to create another kind of religion. So somehow it doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is, in my view, is because, well, religion is just such an intrinsic part of human culture. So it's an intrinsic part of Chinese traditional culture, right? The Taoism and Buddhism and Chinese worship and all of these kind of things. And it's an intrinsic part of Western culture. Religion has become so deeply part of every single culture in the world that if you want to completely eliminate it, you would have to tear out, you would have to tear out the whole culture. Now, of course, religions can change and they can become weaker and things like that, but you can't really just eradicate it completely. And the other thing is, and this goes back to what I've been talking about spirituality, is that simply people, they just have this search for meaning, for something spiritual, and maybe not all people are like that, but there'll always be people who will be having this kind of spiritual thirst and spiritual search. And so then they will find some kind of religion, or they will make a religion if they can't find one. So then the issue is, it's not how do we ban it, but it's really how do you handle it well, right? How do you nurture and use the spiritual seeking, spiritual thirst, the thirst for meaning and for community? How can this be developed in a positive way, right? Otherwise, it just becomes like wild, right? And so the other thing that was funny was when I was doing my research in China in the 1990s, at that time, actually, so religion after the Cultural Revolution, so in the 1980s and 90s, things were opening up. So religion was starting to grow all over the place, but not very visible. So most people didn't really notice, but actually the temples were being built all over the countryside. The churches were being, reopening so all these different religious communities were coming back, but they were not very visible. So most people didn't notice and they didn't realize. And so most people thought China doesn't have any religion. But then we had, like, suddenly in the mid 1990s and end of 1990s, we had millions and millions of people practicing Falun Gong. And then we had all these Falun Gong practitioners going to Zhongnanhai, and and suddenly the whole world, like, who are these people? Like, there were literally tens of thousands of people doing their Falun Gong meditation around the Zhongnanhai, and people were like, where did they come from? What is this? Is this a UFO? Like, what is going on here? And it happened to be that I was doing my research on the Qigong movement in China at the time. And so suddenly, I was the only person who knew what was going on, because nobody really had any idea. And so then, but very quickly, or, after a lot of discussions and everything like that, it became clear that people were very spiritually thirsty. And because there was no legitimate form of religion that people could go to, then they ended up going to Falun Gong. So basically, if you repress or you try to eliminate religion completely, it will come out again, and it might even come out in a weird way. So I think that it's just like we have muscles, okay? And you know, we actually hurt people because we have muscles. We get into fights with people, but that doesn't mean we should abolish exercise, right? It means we should learn how to be healthy and train our body to be healthy in a good way. So I think also our spirit, our spiritual abilities, you know, they need to find their expression. They need to be trained, but they need to be trained in a healthy way. So that's why I think we should look at spirituality in a constructive manner rather than try to squash it. But that said, and so this is the problem that we have in the world today, there are a lot of really unhealthy ways of practicing spirituality and religion. So, I mean, the government, and we even talked about religious conflicts. So if religions aren't capable of handling themselves, you know, if they're causing a lot of, you know, conflicts in society and unhealthy or dangerous practices and so on. So of course, then the government needs to ensure, you know, needs to manage or make sure that religions are, you know, what is the appropriate space for religion, and then there are certain things that religions should not be, you know, should not be doing. So this gets me to my other point, the other question that many of you asked, which is, well, what are the conditions for interfaith dialogue? So one of the readings was about, okay, one of the approaches or the kind of the solutions to the conflicts between religion is we have more interfaith dialogue. So people really of different religions reaching out to each other and trying to have a dialogue. And so a number of you asked, well, actually, well, what are the conditions for that? Because actually many religions, they simply don't accept other religions, right? And so actually, and maybe the more deeply you believe in one particular religion, now, well, the more closed you would be to other religions. So is this a solution to the issue of religious conflict? And so one thing I'd like to say about that is that, and actually this applies not only about the fact that people have different religious beliefs, but they also have different cultures, they have different ideologies, they have different political beliefs. Okay, so we all have all kinds of differences. And to have a strong commitment to one religion or one culture or one nation, one country, right? Or one ideology, doesn't mean that you cannot or are not willing to really to talk and to listen to those who are different from you, and to engage, to talk and to listen and to respect. Doesn't mean that you accept everything about the other people. And in fact, if you have strong faith and deep certitude, you won't be afraid to talk. You won't be afraid to listen to different opinions. You won't be afraid to try to understand different opinions. You won't be afraid to grow in the relationship. In other words, to learn from others without threatening who you really are. So I've engaged in many interreligious dialogues. And and so I've spoken to in interfaith dialogues. I've spoken with Christians and with Muslims and with Hindus and with Sikhs and Jews and Buddhists and Taoists and so on. And and in fact, we in the Baha'i community, every year we organize a kind of an interfaith gathering called World Religion Day. And the different members of different religious communities, I mean, they're deeply committed to their own religion. And I was amazed that sometimes we had some participants in these dialogues, and they were very, very happy, actually, because then we learned from each other, and we found that some areas where we had common ideas and things like that. But then, then when I looked up some of the people who were in the dialogue, it turned out that, some of the people actually have very extreme, were quite extreme in their, the kind of religious organization that they were a member of. So it just showed that we could reduce prejudices a lot by having interfaith dialogues, and we could actually build friendships. We could build true friendships. And so these friendships, dialogue, understanding, respect, all of that doesn't mean that you give up what you believe in. So this is the first thing. So some of you mentioned, well, some people, for example, they were a member of one religion and they were just looking down on and insulting people of another religion. Well, yeah, so that happens. And just like you also have people from one country who insult or look down on people of another country, people of one race who look down and insult people of another race, so this kind of prejudice, it exists all over. And I don't think that those kind of attitudes actually, they are not a good how could I say? I would say that's not a good way to be a member of a certain religion or a member of a country. So no matter what kind, if we're looking at intergroup prejudices, right? So, if I am French and I'm proud to be French and I love my French culture, well, and us French people, we think that Germans don't really know how to eat. Okay. That their food is so bad. All right. All right. But, well, what we'll do then, though, is rather than make fun or, be rude to Germans or look down on them, well, then, we should invite them to a good French dinner, right? And we'll have to admit that they make cars better than us. So, I can be very proud to be French. And the best way to show to be a good Frenchman is to be a gentleman to people of other countries. To share what I have that's good and to receive what they have that's good. So I visit them as a gentleman and they come and see me and I'm a gentleman to them. And so I have met many, Muslims. I went to Pakistan and I was in many Muslims' families. And I know what they thought. I know that they consider that Islam is, that's the religion of God. But they treated me with warmth, with hospitality, with generosity, right? So they thought that my religion or whatever, they thought that's wrong, but that did not, but they showed the best of what it means to be a Muslim to me. And the same thing to Christians. So I've had these experiences with members of all different religions. So that's the way to show your pride in your country, or your pride in your religion, or your faithfulness to your religion, is to do so with nobility, with generosity, with warmth, and with love. And if we know how to do that, then we will be friends. We will be friends, even though you think you're the best and I think I'm the best. But we'll still be very, very good friends. We'll be very, very good friends. Yeah. So that's what I think about interfaith dialogue, or any kind of dialogue between different religions and different countries or so on. At the same time, we also, no matter how different we are, we have to realize that we are all part of one community. In other words, now we're part of the human community. So if I live, I live in Hong Kong, and there are people of many, many different backgrounds, many different cultures, different religions, different ideologies. And no matter how much differences I have with all these different people, but we are living together in Hong Kong. So we have to learn, we have that in common. We are common members of the Hong Kong community. And we are common members of the world community. What hurts the world? Well, hurts all of us. It doesn't matter what our religion, what our nationality, or this or that, right? So we're all in it together. We're all in it together. So no matter how different we are, to be a mature person is to learn to work together with people who are different from us, and actually to accept the fact that they're different. To truly accept that they're different. You will never force them to be like yourself, okay? And then we're going to work together because we live together. It's like we're roommates, okay? Sometimes we don't get along well with our roommate, okay? But you don't get along well with your roommate, maybe you can move to another flat or another room. But this planet Earth is small and we can't move to anywhere else. So we've got to learn how to live together. So the fact that we are all humans, we're all part of the same family in that sense. This is something we all have in common. And it's because of that, because we're humans, we know how to appreciate each other. We know how to respect each other. We know what we can feel the goodness of somebody's heart. I don't care where you're from. I don't care what you believe, but I can feel it when you have a good heart to me, when you have a good intention to me. I can feel that and it moves me, it touches me. So this is it, because we're all humans. We're all part of the same human family. So we've all got to work in that way. Some people said, and so they're speaking about the article on Teilhard de Chardin, the noosphere. So there's this idea that we're all coming together, there's this global kind of consciousness that's coming together. And actually, it's quite interesting now that I'm reading that, because like 10 years ago, it's kind of like Teilhard de Chardin's ideas. Most people would be, yeah, we're kind of going like that. There seems to be globalization and there's this convergence, and even in sociology, everybody was talking about that. But now in recent years, it looks like there's more and more division, right? And somehow, as so many of you wrote, well, it doesn't seem we have this noosphere. It seems this collective brain is like, there are parts of it here and parts of it there. And now with social media, we're all getting into our own little bubbles and we're not communicating. But yeah, so that's obviously true. And but what I would say to that, well, first of all, this is precisely the issue of the broken operating system, a dysfunctional operating system. But it's something that I'm also confident that we're going to grow out of. We're going to figure it out. This is the process of maturing, of growing up. Okay. I'm going to say something about my parents. It's very interesting. So you know, in World War II in Europe and prior to World War II, French and Germans hated each other. So actually they had wars for hundreds of years between the French and the Germans. And actually the French and the British also hated each other too. So, you know, they were always at war with each other for hundreds and hundreds of years. So there were deep prejudice between them. And then, you know, and then in World War I, so, okay, what happened about their prejudice? They started butchering each other and massacring each other in the most deadly war in human history. And after 20 years, they did it again in World War II. So obviously, you know, they were not, you know, in a united noosphere at that time. And they suffered deeply as a result of it. But then they suffered so much from it that they woke up. And then it didn't take long that, and it actually, it's amazing, it's just incredible that the hatred between the French and the Germans just poof, it just disappeared like that. And same between the French and the English. And so my parents, you know, my mother, she went, so in the 1960s, so this was only 15, 20 years after World War II, when the Germans invaded France, killed hundreds of thousands of French people, and the French were involved in bombing German cities and flattening most cities in Germany and everything like that. So you'd think that these people hate each other like with a passion. Well, but my mother, she decided to learn German, and then she went to live with German families while she was a university student. And my father was in Canada, and same thing. You know, Canada was the enemy of the Germans. And then after the war, so many Canadians went to Germany. They wanted to learn about Germany. They wanted to learn about their former enemy. And so my dad went to Germany. And it was so romantic. He went on a ship to Germany. And so my dad and my mother, they met in Germany in a language camp. And this was the atmosphere. Everybody, they knew that hatred causes suffering and war. So the Germans, the French, the English, the Canadians, they all wanted to get to know each other. They all wanted to overcome their prejudices. So they were meeting in these camps, and then they were falling in love. And then so my father, he met my mom, and then he would literally go by ship back and forth between Canada and France to see my mom. Man, that was so romantic. They didn't have airplanes, or maybe airplane was too expensive for ordinary people at the time. Anyway, so, okay, so basically, the conflict after the conflict, it actually led to greater unity and understanding after the conflict. And now you could hardly imagine any deep conflict between Germans and French. Of course, as I just said, you know, we still think we eat better than they do. But it's just a joke now, okay? It's nothing serious, right? So we have moved, we grew, we became more mature. And now sometimes we see that maybe the unity even in Europe is falling apart a little. There's, you know, but this is how we grow, you know, we go in fits and starts, right? You know, it's like a marriage, you know, sometimes you have your fights, and then after the fight, you understand each other more deeply. And then you know, everything's fine for a while, and then there's gonna be another conflict, okay? And so now we see the world is becoming deeply conflictual, and the conflict is because of many deep problems. And some of the problem in our own mindscape. It's problems in our own mind. But also sometimes, you know, we just need to express the conflict is just a phase, and the conflict will lead to a higher resolution or unity at some time in the future, even though it's hard to imagine right now. And anyway, we've got to think about that, because the other option is the end of the world, right? So we've also got to try, you know, to grow and to mature, because now the world is so small, and we are so interconnected. No matter how much we have all our conflicts, We are literally living with each other and stepping on each other's toes all the time. And we can't do a world war. We had a World War II and we can't do a World War III. So that means we have to grow up. We have to learn how to deal with our problems in a mature fashion. And often now we see people are not mature. They have a really warped mindscape and operating system. So that's going to cause a lot of problems. But we'll grow out of it, because we won't. I do believe that we are wise enough to avoid the worst. I do believe that we're wise enough to. So we'll go through some difficulties, but we'll get out of it. This is also my faith as a Baha'i as well. I'm optimistic about it. So yeah. So in a sense, also this requires, when we face challenges, we need some kind of faith to overcome the challenge, right? So this goes back to the mindscape, what we were talking about about the mindscape early in this class. What do we do when we face a challenge? So what is the state of our mind? So is our mindscape just full of aggressive and bad entities always attacking you? Are those the objects of consciousness in your mindscape, making you feel like, scared all the time? Scared, or do you have positive objects of consciousness in your mindscape that are giving you faith, that are giving you a good direction, that are giving you the positive energy, or the power that empower you, to go forward no matter what's happening. Never mind what's happening in the world. I just keep moving forward in a positive way, right? So there are objective things outside of the world that are coming into our minds, but then it's also, what are we doing in our own mindscape? Every time, the worst time in my day is when I read the news on my phone. So it's like when I have my breakfast, and I am a news addict, right? So when I have my breakfast, I read the news. And then, and I read different news from different sources to have different, perspectives. And then I do it a few other times during the day. And it's an addiction, I have to say. And these are the worst times of my day, is when I'm watching the news or reading the news, because it's almost only bad things, right? Okay, so this is a source of negative energy coming into my mind. Unfortunately, I think you need to know something about the news, so maybe you can't avoid it so much. And I mean, I'm a sociologist, so I can't cut myself off from it. My daughter, she cut herself off completely from the news, and she's so happy. So maybe, I said, maybe you're right, So anyway, so this is a negative source of energy, right? But then there are other things during the day that are positive sources of energy, right? So what are the other things that I'm reading? What are the other things that I'm meditating about? What are the other things that I'm praying about? What are the other things that I'm grateful for? Always being so grateful for all the wonderful things that are happening in my life, and to my children, to my wife, to the things that are happening. So all the good things, they're, fortunately, they are in my mind most of the time, right? So then they give me the energy to go forward happily. So this is the idea of, how can we, and at the core, for me, the core of that is faith. It's spiritual religious faith is the core of that for me. So then a number of you asked about actually spiritual individualism. So I wrote so there's one of the essays that I wrote, and it was about spiritual individualism. And I kind of criticized it, saying it's like consumerism, right? It's a consumer commodity. And so some of you were like, well, why is that? And actually, what's the problem with that? So yeah, right. So basically, let's say now we have so many religious institutions are like, a lot of them are having problems. So let's just have our own individual spirituality. And I'd say that's true. You know, that's better than nothing. And so that's a big trend actually in the world, right? Is right, spiritual individualism. And actually, I'm not against it. I actually think it's better than nothing, and in many ways very positive. So I did a study. So I wrote in the essay about these people in Asheville, and they were doing this dance church, and so it was literally don't follow any movement, and they were rolling around. You know, they were just like, you know, with this, you know, and rolling on top of each other and bumping into each other, and you know, and they were having a wonderful time. And they said, just be yourself. Don't follow any set form, right? Spontaneous, free. Okay, so some of you asked, well, aren't some of them still doing some Taoist forms? Well, partly, but even then they said, no, don't follow any form. It has to be absolutely free. And so I did this study because a lot of these people went to this this Asheville dance collective. They were also practicing Taoism, American Taoist, and doing Qigong and all things like that. And so they also went to China. They went to Huashan in China, and they met with Taoist monks. And then there were some Taoist monks, right, who are in the institution. And they were like, there's nothing to do with Taoism. That's just, they're just full of themselves. They're just full of themselves. They think that they are following the Tao, but actually they're just, right, they're just following their own ego. And so there's very strong debates between these different ways. So the spiritual individualists who say, well, we're free, and that's the best thing. And, you know, Dao Fa Zhiran, right? Taoism is about natural, being natural and free, no authority. And you guys in China, with your Quanzhen Dao and your Chujia Dao Shi, and all of these monks, you are following some Confucian authority. It doesn't even have anything to do with Taoism. You know, Taoism is free, right? Xiaoyao, right? So they said, we know the true Tao. The individualist way is the true way. And you Dao Shi, you monks, actually, no, you know, and you're corrupt and you lost it. And even you guys admit it. You, in your temples and your monasteries, there's no Tao there. You even said so. You said, you know, 他们那边我们这个庙里面全是吃道教. You know, they're eating Taoism. That means they're not practicing Taoism, these monks. So even the monks told us that. So there you go. Get rid of this institution. Just be free. So anyway, there were all these debates. And but those who organize a lot of these free kind of activities, well, actually, they're not free in that you often have to pay for them. So they're businesses, right? And this is what you'll find now in mainland China, and even Hong Kong too. Shen Xinling, and actually Joyce, those of you who have Joyce as your tutor, she's done a lot of research on it. So these groups that are doing individualistic spirituality, but actually it's usually very expensive. You have to pay to be free. You have to pay, and often pay a lot of money to be free. But why not? You know, so I don't have a problem with that. What's the problem, right? Go ahead, right? If anybody wants to offer workshops, offer dance sessions, training and meditation, you know, and you're spending your time to teach it, just like an English teacher, so why not? Well, I mean, no problem, go ahead, right? So actually, I don't see any real problem about it. But once you are a consumer of something, somehow there's the idea that I am right. In French, we say, the consumer is God, right? Or the consumer is king, right? So I am the boss because I'm the consumer. And I don't think that's basically, I think, and so you will not buy something that you don't like, basically. You will never buy something that you don't like. But I think that to grow, you actually always need to go through experiences that you don't like. You can never really grow and mature if you don't encounter challenges and tests. And if you don't make any sacrifice. And the sacrifice is not just paying money, like some other kind of sacrifice. So this is, I think this is the thing for spiritual growth, but personal growth in general, right? You can't buy your personal growth. You have to undergo tests and challenges. You have to overcome them, and you will never buy a test. You will never buy a challenge. But this also reflects the Baha'i view, and I think many religious people of other religions would agree with me, is that really you also grow by serving, by seeing how you could serve your community, by seeing how you could help others. And so that's not something that you can buy. You have to do it, and it's actually, you have to give. You have to, rather than charge people for it, you actually have to give, and then you grow spiritually. Yeah, so that's the way I see it. But of course, a lot of people, they're totally fine with consumer spirituality, and I have no objection to it. I totally respect those people who engage in that kind of who engage in that kind of spirituality. So then we had another question, which was about cults. So we were talking about fundamentalism and, the idea that all, absolute good and absolute evil, and dividing people into the good religion, the bad religion, everything like that. So then some of you asked, what about the cults, the xiejiao, right? So how do we know, is this true, or is this just some kind of prejudice? And I think this is a really good question. So we should always avoid prejudice to different kinds of groups, because many groups that are considered to be cults are simply groups that we just don't know much about. So because we don't know about them, because they're small and minority groups, then people have prejudice about them, and they think that they're weird, and then they think that they're dangerous. But they think they're dangerous simply because they don't know about it. It's not familiar, and maybe they have strange ideas, right, and whatever. But I don't think that really makes them a group, a cult. I think, and I really think, as I was talking about religious dialogue, we should really try to respect people of all different beliefs, even if they're very strange beliefs, or minority beliefs, which might not be strange, right? But that said, there are forms of religion that are dangerous, that are not healthy. And so for me, there's a few criteria for that. Obviously, I think that any religion that is advocating or pursuing violence, violence or social exclusion, that kind of religion is unhealthy, and that kind of religion should be right. It should be managed. It should be restricted. But we have violent types of religion is not only unknown cults. Even we have among mainstream big religions, we have violent sects, right? We have violent Buddhists and violent Muslims and violent Christians, and so on. So any group that is really engaging in violence, or is engaging in excluding, like really propagating hatred against other groups, I think that's totally unacceptable. So that's a dangerous religious behavior. So that's pretty obvious. But then we also have other forms of unhealthy religious behavior, which is well, actually charging a lot of money. Okay, so I think that religion shouldn't be a business. All right, so we have people who, right, I was just mentioning a few minutes ago, some people or some small businesses offer courses like for meditation or this or that. Okay, that's fine. But when some religions become major businesses, like really sucking out all of your money, then that's not right. Okay, so one of you mentioned the Church of Scientology, and that's a business that operates as a religion. So each you have to go into some courses, and at each level it will be more and more expensive, like outrageously expensive. So you will deplete all your money when you go into this kind of religion. So obviously I don't think that's appropriate. All religions, you should donate money, and that's totally normal. But that religion becomes a business that is charging you very high amounts for, and requires you to pay very high and higher amounts. That's not right. So that's unhealthy. It's a dangerous kind of religion. And then we have religions or religious groups that break up the family, or that socially isolate people. And here is where we had some actually, for example, Falun Gong, and you could see this in some other groups. But again, you could also find it within some Christian groups, some Muslim groups, whatever. There are all kinds of groups in different religions, but sometimes it's unhealthy. So the idea here is that you should become so totally devoted to your religion that if your family members if they think that it's too much, then you break off from your family members, right? Or you break off from your friends. If your friends disagree, and then in normal situation, well, it's your friend, so you kind of you talk about it, and then you understand each other, you respect each other, and same with your family. But you also take care of your family, and you take care of your friends and things like that. But if this group says, oh, your friends are pulling you away, your family is pulling you away, that's not good, so cut off from your family members, cut off from your friends. That's really bad. That's really, really bad, because that's saying it's making you into dependent on that religious group, and breaking up society, right? So that's actually one of the main characteristics of a cult, is this kind of thing. So these kind of things happen in religion, but again, there are bad behaviors that happen everywhere. There are bad behaviors that happen in, the health industry, the cosmetic surgery industry, the insurance industry, any kind of industry or any kind of social field. There are bad behaviors, and they need to be stopped. But that doesn't mean you stop everything, right? Doesn't mean you ban insurance, because there are insurance brokers who are cheating people when they sell financial products, right? You don't ban the cosmetic surgery industry because some people are using high pressure marketing, right? You ban the behavior. So same thing, there's certain kind of religious behavior is wrong, and that that should be regulated, or religious communities themselves should also stop that. So yeah, so that's about cults and dangerous religious behavior. So, all right, before I move on, any questions or comments on what I just said until now?
I would like to ask, what do you think of other religions? People just talk people into their religion, like if you talk the Muslim into Christianity. What do you what do you think about it?
I think it's So you mean if somebody tried to kind of preach their religion to other people?
Yes, and the people like maybe accept it, or like they are, they have been talked into the other religion.
Yeah, yeah, of course. So, any kind of discussion, we should feel free to share what we believe, right? And certainly if we think that something is very good, we would want to tell others, right? So whether that's our religion or, some good diet, or whatever, anything that we like, it's just totally normal to share it to others. And certainly a religion that obviously, it considers itself to have good teachings, and true teachings and so on. So it wants to share it. So I see no problem at all in people promoting and disseminating their religion, and trying to, convince people. So, um, but it should be, anyway, again, this is, now I'm just going to speak from a Baha'i perspective, for pressure, though, that's not right, right? So sharing is one thing, but actually trying to pressure people into joining religion is wrong. So I think pressuring people, using psychological or social pressure, giving them material incentives. So basically, right, like, oh, if you join, you will get these material benefits. I don't think that's right. Or using, how can I say, actually sometimes using meditation techniques to make people feel so good, and then and kind of hypnotize people during the meditation in order that they join the religion. So these are kind of manipulation techniques. So I think that's not appropriate. So everyone should have the freedom to share their ideas, but also the freedom to turn down, to turn down ideas, to accept or to reject, and right, to join a religion and to leave a religion. All right. So this is, anybody should be free to join any religion, and they should be free to leave any religion, and they should be free to be not religious, right? So this is the freedom of religion, right? And so freedom to be not religious is an important part of religious freedom, and also the freedom to leave a religion is also an important part. To leave religion, to change religion, or to be investigating religion. All of these are parts of what religious freedom means. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so Tom, yeah. So do similarities help religions understand each other, or make them hate each other even more? That's a great question. Yeah. So as far as I know about the history of Christianity, heretics are more damnable than non-believers because the latter are ignorant about God and thus forgivable. But knowingly twisting the teachings of God is quite serious a crime. So I think that's why the animosity between Christianity, Judaism, and Islam is so severe compared to non-Abrahamic religions. And Catholics and Protestants used to hate each other even more than non-Christians. Yeah, so that's actually really, I think that's a really good point. It's quite interesting that the Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, they're actually quite similar. And so but the conflicts between them are so large. And indeed, one often has the greatest disagreements with those who are the most similar. Yeah. So, well, my answer to that, so I think this is true. And my answer to that is, well, again, this goes to the idea of growing up, maturation, we, again, I think Christians have grown up largely. They had wars of religion, and now the Catholics and Protestants respect each other. And the Jews, they respect each other with Jews. And they're learning, I could say that they're still learning between Muslims and Christians and Jews. But but even then, even though there are tensions now, it's far less than there was, let's say, during the Crusades or during some of the wars, right, between Christians and Muslims during the Middle Ages, or, you know. So this is also part of maturing and growing up, you know, learning how, I think now we're better at dealing with these problems than before, but obviously there's still more growing up, more growing up is required. Yes, yes. All right, so now I am going to, let me see. Right, and so then there's the other, okay, so what do you think about religious cults that are similar to the big religions but have slightly different teachings? For example, a Christian cult believes in its own modern prophet, and other mainstream Christians would accuse the cult as fake. Do you think such cults are acceptable? So, okay, first of all, I'm not a Christian, so I have no view on these different groups. But I think that generally, and I've actually spoken with a lot of Christians who study cults, and generally speaking, you know, you can, again, it goes back to the fact that you can totally disagree with the theology of a group. You can consider that this group is completely wrong, but that doesn't mean that they don't have the right to exist, okay? You know, free Christianity, free choice, free will is a fundamental teaching, right? God gave us the capacity to make judgments. And so that means, you know, there are going to be many different groups around, and we have the freedom to make the choice. So that's one thing. So I may completely and totally disagree with them, but that doesn't mean that they can't exist. So whether a group is allowed to exist or not, or whether a group should be restricted or not, it has nothing to do with its theology, with its beliefs. It has to do with its behavior. If its behavior is dangerous to society, then it should be restricted. But if they have disagreements, theological disagreements with other groups, as long as their disagreements are you know, that they're not like violent to each other, killing each other, you know, doing bad things to each other, well, that's fine, right? Yeah. So in fact, the Baha'i faith has also, you know, there are groups that we call covenant breakers who have really violated the deepest deepest teachings of the Baha'i faith. So we shouldn't have anything to do with them. And yet, you know, they have the right to exist. And so there they are. And we won't, you know, they have the right, you know, they're just going to exist. We should, yeah, yeah. So. Right, and then that reminds me that many Chinese believe Taoism, Buddhism, and Confucianism at the same time. Right. So then we have, like, in different religions, there are different attitudes, and so some are more, let's say, it's fine to, like, be all three at the same time, or more at the same time, or mix them. You know, that's fine. And others are much more strict about that you shouldn't mix things up. All right, so let me go to my next part of my talk. We're actually. Let me see here. All right, so I'm going to go to a share screen. And so I'm going to talk about how I see these questions, or, you know, how I see it from a Baha'i perspective, many of these different questions. All right. So, all right, this is basically the Medium essay, and I'll just go through some of the main points, right? So we talked about all of these problems, right? So how do we avoid the distortion of religion? How do we avoid the corruption of religion by political forces? You know, how do we avoid the divisions and conflicts associated with religion? And what about a healthy relationship between religion and science? And what's a healthy relationship between religion and spirituality? So, okay, so I already discussed the idea. What about eliminating religion or restricting it as much as possible? So I said, I don't think that's a possible solution. Okay, So now what's interesting about the Baha'i faith is that the Baha'i faith emerged in 1844. So it actually emerged at the time of modernity. So really at the time when the crisis of religion was reaching its peak. So prior to the 19th century, everywhere in the world was really in a complete, the whole society was religious. But by the 19th century, that was cracking, right? And all through, whether it's through modernity in Europe, colonialism in much of the world, the ancient religions, the traditions, that start to break apart. And people start to say these old religions they're not suitable anymore, right? So the Baha'i faith was born right at that moment. So literally born at the time of the crisis of religion. So first of all, there's some key Baha'i teachings that are really important to understand how to see this. So first of all, is the idea that there is an ultimate reality, but none of us can really directly know or understand the ultimate reality. So we call the ultimate reality in different languages. We call it God, we call it Allah, Brahma, Dharma, Shangdi, Tian, Dao, all of these different things. So in different cultures and religions, we have different names for the ultimate reality. And actually, if you look at them closely, these names have they actually don't mean exactly the same thing, right? So Shangdi and Dao, is it the same? Is it not the same thing? Is Dharma the same as, Brahma? Well, you can argue about it. But the thing is, all these differences are due to the limitation of human understanding. So the essence of the reality is hidden beyond human understanding. So it's just like Dao Ke Dao, Fei Chang Dao. We can never fully understand the essence of the ultimate reality. So all the descriptions, anything we say about it, whether we're in religion, whether we're in philosophy or whatever, it's always going to be partial and incomplete. So as Baha'u'llah said, every attempt to attain to an understanding of God's inaccessible reality hath ended in complete bewilderment, and every effort to approach his exalted self and envisage his essence hath resulted in hopelessness and failure. So we can't know the ultimate reality. But on the other side, we can see signs of the ultimate reality everywhere in the world. So all the perfections of the world are signs or reflections of the ultimate reality. So we can see God in an atom, in a rose, in the song of a nightingale, in the beauty of a mathematical theorem, in the profundity of a philosophical theory, and in the sparkle of your eye. All of these give us glimpses of God. So as Baha'u'llah said, how resplendent the luminaries of knowledge that shine in an atom, and how vast the oceans of wisdom that surge in a drop. Now, the human soul is a mirror of God. So our soul can perceive these clues and are attracted to them. We like the beauty of a mathematical theorem. We like the beauty of a rose. We are attracted to these things, and our soul can reflect these things, right? So for example, any human perfection, so never giving up trying to crack the mysteries of a universe, if you're striving for justice, impartiality, and fairness, being generous to strangers, learning to love and to care for children, for animals, for our elders, for our loved ones, for our friends, for those who suffer, for all humans. All of these beautiful deeds, these beautiful acts, these perfections, all these human perfections are reflections of the signs of God in the human soul. But the mirror of our soul is clouded by our lower nature. So they obscure our perception of the signs of God in the world and in ourselves. They make it difficult for us to manifest, to show these perfections, these virtues. So actually, it's like we're plants. We're growing in the muddy soil, okay? And it's not easy to grow out of that soil, to grow into the light. And we're born in that soil, and we'll always be rooted in that soil. So even if we turn to the light, we try to develop our flowers and the beautiful fruit, but we will always be rooted in the soil. So we live our lives growing between the soil, the material world, and the spiritual sun, right? The divine, right? The spiritual world. So we're in between, right? We're rooted in the material world and we're growing into the spiritual world. So spirituality is really, it's like watering our spirit, right? Tending to the growth of our soul toward the spiritual sun, toward God, or no matter what you want to call it, inwardly and outwardly, through our inner reflection, but also through how we behave, right? So from a Baha'i perspective, the role of religion is to provide us with the teachings and guidance and practice and community for doing that, for nurturing our spirituality and for serving humanity. But as I mentioned, that's a problem now because so many religious institutions are corrupt. Often their teachings come from ancient times. They often contribute to social divisions. So there are two key concepts in the Baha'i teachings that help to understand this. One is called progressive revelation, and the other one is called collective maturation. Collective maturation, so I already talked about growing up, right? Becoming mature. So collective maturation means that as a whole, as humanity, we undergo collective transformations. And it's just like a person. So in life, we pass through infancy, childhood, pre-adolescence, adolescence, adulthood, and so on. And at each of these stages, we see the world very differently. We experience the world differently, and we have a different capacity of understanding. So what's good for us at one stage, like when we're a child, is not necessarily what's good for us at another stage, like when we're an adult. So when we grow up and when we mature, there are some important lessons from the previous stage. And there's some precious things that we want to keep, but then there are other things that we have to let go, right? And so that's how we grow as individuals. And from a Baha'i perspective, that's actually also how we grow as humanity, how we collectively grow as humanity. Now, one of you actually commented on this and you said that, well, and this is a good point, it's not so linear. Okay, now I just talked about it linear, but you could see that when we grow, but that's also true. I mean, as a father, I know that being a father to my daughters, that, you know, they grow and then they, you know, you go backward at times and then you grow again. And sometimes you're growing on this aspect and you're actually regressing on another aspect. So growth, maturation is not, it's not simply linear, okay? But nonetheless, when you turn back and then you see, well, okay, overall, there was this overall trend. But while you're in it, it's quite messy and you step forward and back and then again, you know, and so on. Okay, so this is collective maturation. So humanity is undergoing this collective maturation. And now in the Baha'i faith, the idea is that we're moving from late adolescence to adulthood. Now, yeah, I'll talk about that in a little later. So the other key Baha'i concept is progressive revelation. So this means that God has sent messengers or teachers to educate humanity at different stages of humanity's evolution. And so these figures are called manifestations of God. So that ultimate reality, which we cannot know, they reveal it to us in a way that we can understand. And there are always manifestations, there always will be. So figures like Zoroaster, Krishna, Buddha, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, Baha'u'llah. So each time a manifestation of God comes, they give us teachings that help us in our process of maturation. So from a Baha'i perspective, all the different major world religions, they actually come from different manifestations of the same God. And so they actually share the same essential teachings and the same purpose. But if that's the case, then why are there so many differences between religions? Well, first of all, different manifestations of God came at different stages of our collective maturation. So although they have the same essential spiritual teachings, right, in using different ways to talk about the growth of our spirit, right? The purification of our spirit. Many of their specific social teachings and practices are different because they were adapted to the different needs of humanity at the time of their revelation. So people had different needs at different times, and so the religious teachings were different at those different times. And different manifestations of God appeared in different geographic, historic, cultural, and linguistic contexts. So they used different language, they used different words, they responded to different social realities. So that means that they look very different from each other, and they have very, very diversified expressions. And as I mentioned a few weeks ago, so out of all these teachings, new religious traditions emerged with new additions, interpretations, cultural elaborations, sects. So there's so much diversity among all the different religions and their branches. So we have this incredible diversity. But from a Baha'i perspective, these are just diversity of actually one religion. So there is but one faith of God, eternal in the past, eternal in the future. So this means that we should appreciate and learn from all the religious traditions. But that doesn't mean that they're all good and all suitable for today. So some teachings and institutions suitable for the past might not be suitable for the present. Cultural and historical conditions have changed. Many additions and changes have corrupted or distorted the spirit of religious teachings. The Baha'i teachings emphasis. And now, okay, so today there are a few important points, two important features of the current stage of collective maturation. The first is that we're right. We're in our transition from collective adolescence to collective adulthood. What does that mean? Well, during childhood, we blindly accept authority we believe are seniors. During adolescence, we reject authority and we want to do everything by ourselves. So as adolescents, we have many new capacities and powers. We can do so many things, but we still don't know how to do them fully and responsibly. Sometimes we act passionately and selflessly for good causes, but sometimes we're self-centered and immature. So isn't that how the world is nowadays? But when we mature from adolescence to adulthood, we learn how to use our powers responsibly and rationally. We're no longer like children blindly following authority, but we also know that we can't just do our own thing. We know our limitations. We learn from our failures. We can listen to others and we can understand their perspectives. And we can come to a common understanding of what's best for all of us. So this is what it means to be mature, collectively mature. And so that's what I was saying a little earlier, how I feel that the world right now is going through a difficult period in our process of maturation. And the second is this process is about transitioning into an integrated global civilization. So in the past, we've gone from tribes to small kingdoms and city-states to empires and nation states. Now we're in a process of transformation into a single global society. This is incredibly difficult. We can see that. It's very painful. It's fiercely opposed by many groups, religions, countries, and political ideologies. But it's inevitable. From a Baha'i perspective, it's inevitable. So that's the story of humanity, the story of ever higher levels of integration. And now we have the capacity, we haven't yet done it, to allow all the diversity of humans, so many different individuals, so many different cultures, societies, okay, to learn how to live all together in peace and unity, in justice. That means that we have to abolish racial, national, and ethnic and religious prejudice. We need the equality of men and women. We need a just economic order with the elimination of extremes of wealth and poverty. And we need a system of global governance that takes into account the interest of all of humanity, as well as its component nations and groups. Now, unity doesn't mean uniformity or the elimination of diversity. Actually, unity is only possible through diversity, and it protects diversity. So Abdul Baha said, a beautiful garden is a garden with flowers of different colors. If there are only flowers of one color, that's going to be a boring garden. So unity is actually a beautiful garden with multiple flowers living in harmony. So we need, at this stage, we need to nurture humanity's transition into collective maturity and global integration. And spirituality involves developing that maturity and the capacity to work together with unity with people of different backgrounds and perspectives. So this idea, I mean, a lot of people disagree with this Baha'i perspective, right? So whether it's different religions, different spiritual movements, social movements, ideologies, or governments, they would look at this issue differently. And from the Baha'i perspective, Baha'is would not interfere with all these different ways of dealing with the challenges facing humanity and not getting involved in these controversies or conflicts between them. Instead, so now looking at how to move forward in this world, there are some principles to follow. And so the idea is to build communities where you put certain principles into practice. So how do you build a global community that puts these principles into practice? And so the first principle is the independent search for truth. So you don't blindly follow others, you investigate reality for yourself. So a community where people are engaged in the independent search for truth. That's the first point. And the second thing is, in the Baha'i faith, now we are mature, that means, or we're moving to maturity, that means we don't need religious clergy. So no priests, pastors, monks, mullahs, or so on. Everybody needs to learn to think and to learn for themselves. But nobody has enough knowledge. Everybody has limitations. So we need to learn how to study and learn together. This means there will always be a diversity of views and understandings. Different views, different understandings contribute to our overall understanding, but nobody has the right to impose their understanding on others. Another point is that in the age of maturity, we have unprecedented material powers and capacities. We also have unprecedented intellectual and spiritual capacities. Maturity signifies, if we're mature, that means we can harmonize all these capacities. So we have to overcome these dichotomies between materialism and spiritual and religion. We can't have materialism that excludes spirituality, nor can we have a spirituality or a religion cut off from science, or from the physical world, or from material concerns. So a mature civilization needs to integrate the spiritual and material dimensions of life. So another thing is that spirituality is not only about personal transformation, it's collective. That means we need to build a new type of community that expresses the spirit of the oneness of humanity. We need to build a new pattern of relationships in which we practice our spiritual qualities. And so how do you do that? Well, this is a pattern of relationships with no domination. So that means no domination of one sex over another, of one race over others, of one ethnic group over others, of one class over others. Also, where not one person dominates others through their personality or ambition. So it's basically, how do you have relationships that aren't based on power? How do you have relationships when you're nurturing everybody's capacities and participation, no matter what their background or their abilities, no matter if you come from a rich or poor family, no matter whether you come from a rich or poor region or country? So that means seeing that all the different backgrounds, cultures, personalities, and perspectives all contribute to a greater whole, to a higher unity. And this means something that's very important in the Baha'i faith, which is consultation, always searching for the truth together, taking collective decisions based on sharing ideas and listening to each other, seeing a discussion not as an argument to win or to lose, or for one group to defeat another, but a process for all perspectives to contribute to a higher understanding. So many aspects about this in terms of building community. And this kind of community is rooted in the grassroots, but it needs to be globally integrated. So you need a new type of institution that exemplifies universal participation and unity and diversity. So, and everybody is part of the consultative process at all levels. So actually, we just had in the Baha'i community in Hong Kong and around the world, elections just last week. So right. So we elect the members of our institutions at the local level, at the national level, and every 5 years at the global level. So that means you have an integrated international community and members who are literally tribesmen in the Congo, who live right in the skyscrapers of Hong Kong, who live in Iceland and India, no matter where, rural, urban, rich, poor, everybody's part of this community. All different ethnic groups, social classes, races, religious backgrounds, and cultures. So they're all learning to work together. They're all learning to build unity in spite of all of their different backgrounds. And this is the most diverse, geographically widespread, united community in the world, and the only international organization, whether it's a religious NGO or international institution, that has elections literally at a global, local, national, and global level. So an electoral system where that's based on service, not on ambition. No campaigning or nominating in elections. So I had the election, we had our election in Tai Po, where I live in Hong Kong, and we basically all wrote down in secret ballot the 9 names of the 9 Baha'is that we thought that we wanted to elect. No campaigning, no nominations. And then who the 9 got the most votes? Okay, they were elected. And to be honest, most of them don't want to be elected. Too bad. You're elected, you have no choice. This is the opposite of most elections now, where I have my political ambitions. I want to run for election. Right? So and all right. So elected members have no individual power, and this type of institution is not based on personal ambition or self-interest. So most organizations in the world today actually reward and amplify competitive struggle for power. I mean, basically, if you want to advance in your organization, or if you want to advance in society, you have to be ambitious, you have to be competitive, you have to be ready to struggle for power. If you don't like that, you have to learn, because that's how it is. So the Baha'i community is trying to create a community that's not based on that. And so that also means no taking part in partisan politics or political campaigns, and not receiving financial contributions from outsiders or from governments. So you try to make positive contributions to society within the framework of the law, without affiliating to any government or political force, seeking political help, or seeking political power. So this protects the religion from being corrupted by political alliances. No political alliances allowed. And so this is an important lesson from the history of religion in the past. So the purpose of this community is to help human society in its transition to maturity and to global integration. Baha'is, together with their friends and others from other backgrounds, are learning how to put these teachings into practice. So Baha'is are doing all these things, and they're learning, and they're always trying to bring others into their learning process and to learn together. And so they're doing that all over the world. So having heard that, many people just think, well, that's utterly unrealistic, totally utopian. So many people disagree with this. And that's totally fine. And quite understandable. It just seems so totally unrealistic. But Baha'is are just totally fine, and they won't be, that kind of skepticism doesn't bother them. Basically, the Baha'i teaching started with one person, Baha'u'llah. And actually, he was put in jail because of his teachings. And he spent 40 years in jail because of his teachings. And so these teachings that I just mentioned, at the time, it's like one man in a prison in Iran and then in the Ottoman Empire. How could it just seemed like utterly hopeless? And plus, his followers were executed by and the Baha'i faith was persecuted by 2 of the mightiest empires of the time, the Persian Empire and the Ottoman Empire. These teachings were revealed in a prison cell. So all of this was created by somebody in a prison. How could it be turned into a reality? Well, but over time, right, these teachings spread to the whole world, every single corner of the world, and no clergy, no professionals. So people who are touched, who are moved by these teachings, and they said, yeah, I want to do that too. I want to help with this. So they start working on it and turn it into reality. So now you see this kind of community literally everywhere in the world. So it's a little seed, and it started as a seed. Now it's little sprouts growing around the world. Still small sprouts, but it's still sprouts around the world. But these sprouts are growing, and they're growing. They're learning to do more. They have more capacity, more understanding. No matter the turmoils, persecution in some countries, whatever, no storms will have ever stopped the Baha'i community just from moving forward happily, advancing and carrying out this vision. With optimism. Now, some people disagree with this vision because they actually don't agree with the Baha'i claim that all religions are one, or they reject some of its teachings. So many other religions, they prefer to emphasize what makes their religion really absolutely unique, special or unique, or what makes them unique and different from others. And some non-religious people, they don't agree with the Baha'i vision because they don't agree with religion in general, or they remember all the bad things that have been done in the name of religion. Or actually, they also look at the danger of utopian visions and so on. So from a Baha'i perspective, all of these religious objections to the Baha'i faith and non-religious objections, that's fine. And actually, it's very valuable. It's good to understand the unique aspects of different religious traditions. That helps us to gain different perspectives on reality and to really deepen the idea of unity and diversity, that we really have to respect difference and when people want to be different. And also, we need to learn, right, as part of maturation, we need to learn the lessons of the past. So when atheists and anti-religious people point out, the problems with religion, that's very good. That's very valuable because we need to learn. And some people agree with some of the Baha'i teachings, but not others. So from a Baha'i perspective, Baha'u'llah revealed his teachings to all humanity, and people can take some of it, they can take all of it, they can take none of it, whatever. And they also consider that they're not doing this alone. So many different groups and organizations, different ideologies, philosophies, movements, they're all trying to build a better world. They are really, so many people are trying to build a better world. And so in a sense, Baha'is feel that they're together with all these groups of people in different ways, sometimes with conflicts, but really they all care to build a better world. And so we all learn. We're all learning, right? And we all have challenges, and so we all need to be humble. We all need to have humility as we learn. And actually, so in a sense, teaching this course for me is part of that, right? It's about exploring and sharing these different cultural and religious traditions, spirituality, and also looking at different theories and philosophy and anthropology and sociology. How can they contribute to this discussion? And everything that you shared in your discussions, in your reflections, in your arguments, your doubts, everything like that, that's also an important part of this discussion. So in a sense, all of this is part of this learning to learning to grow, learning to understand the diversity of the world, and learning to understand and respect each other, so that in the midst of all the diversity, we can come to a deeper understanding and unity. So I really think you should read the last Medium article, which really brings it all together, okay? But now we don't have time. Read the final article on your own, and it really goes through the different aspects of the mindscape, operating system, ontologies, and so on, and kind of lays out then what is spiritual, what are some pointers then for spirituality, but not from a Baha'i perspective. So now I just shared my own views, but all of you will, we are all on our own search for truth, and we will all come to our own answers. And for some of us, our answer is going to be an atheist answer. And we'll see how we can build a better world on a materialist foundation. And other of us will find, our answer, we'll keep searching. And maybe we'll find some kind of individualistic spirituality. And others of us will be already in a religion, or will join a religion or something like that. But at the end of the day, we're all involved in a search. and we all need to be humble about it because the world is very complicated. But the core thing is, keep something we know in our heart, we know what is right. And don't forget that. Hold on to that light in your heart. Hold on to that light in your heart and keep it shining. Let it shine more and let it bring more light to people around you. And that's the main thing. At the end of the day, you can forget everything in this course if you just remember that one thing. Know that light in your heart. Keep it shining and let it shine around you. So that's all. And we have a few more minutes for any questions or for any, any comments or discussion. Are you, Tom, are you talking?
Hello.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm talking. I mean, I find the idea of progressive revelation of Baha'i faith quite interesting to me because, I mean, as far as I know about Christianity or Islam, I mean, the teachings of these religions are complete and sealed. I mean, as these religions claim. I mean, like in Christianity, Jesus had paid the ultimate price for human salvation, and in Islam, Prophet Muhammad was the final prophet sent by Allah. So I think by doing so, these religions can keep themselves consistent in hundreds of these years because the teachings are complete. The job is basically done. The job is basically done. But I mean, in Baha'i faith, if the teaching of the God is not complete, there are still progress to make. How do Baha'i faith keep itself consistent, and why should people follow the Baha'i faith? How do they know they are on the correct path since since the job of the God is not done yet? They don't yet know the ultimate truth. Yeah, that's my question.
Right. Yeah, so certainly, and actually this also goes to your earlier question about the divisions between the Abrahamic religions, right? So the Jews consider that, there were many prophets, but then it kind of ended, and so they don't recognize that Jesus was, most Jews don't recognize that Jesus was the Messiah, or that he was sent by God. And then Christians don't recognize that Muhammad was a prophet of God. And none of these, whether it's Jews, Christians, or Muslims, would recognize that Baha'u'llah is a manifestation of God. So they all consider that but already, okay, I'm just going to speak from a Baha'i perspective, right? Now, right, so my Christian, Jewish, and Muslim friends, they see it differently. But already we can already see that the idea of progressive revelation is already there, right? So it's like God was sending prophets, but then it ended, and it ended earlier for the Jews, and then it ended a little later for the Christians, and then it ended a little later for the Muslims. And so for the Baha'i perspective, it just never ends, okay? And why would God why would God abandon humanity and end the process of revelation? And there are prophecies in the earlier religions, in the Bible and in Islam. There are prophecies about the arrival, what we call the second coming of Jesus, about the arrival of the Mahdi, and various, the promised one. So actually, these religions do anticipate that actually there will be a promised one. And so Baha'u'llah claimed that he was the promised one. So actually, the Baha'u'llah's claim fits into the vision of the that we have in the Bible and that we have in Islam. But Baha'u'llah said that there will, in 1,000 years, there will be another manifestation of God. Okay, so there are things that we need to do now, but humanity is going to change. And so even the Baha'i teachings, after a while, they will also be no longer be suited to humanity. But we're not there yet, right? So now we have to do what we need to do now. And then later at some point, it's gonna, right, the situation again is going to be changed. And then there will be a need for new revelation. But that's going to be much later. Yeah. So we still have a lot of work to do from a Baha'i perspective before starting to prepare for the next one. Yeah. All right. So, yeah. So again, please read my last essay, which the title is, let me see here. Right, right, it's about the ingredients of a new human operating system. A new human operating system, what will the ingredients be? And if another thing I should mention, for some of you brought up the issue of science and religion. So I teach another class, another Common Core class on science and religion, CCHU 9061. And so that's going to be taught next semester. We've been teaching it this semester. It's fascinating. I co-teach it with a quantum physicist, Mike Brownett, who's also a Christian. And we really go into the scientific method, a lot of the more, we could say, philosophical aspects of religion, but also very concrete. It's really fascinating. And so if you're still interested in exploring some of these ideas, and specifically on the question of science and religion, so you can take the Common Core class, CC, I'm going to type it in HU 9061, yeah, on science and religion, which is going to be offered in September. And well, Steve is usually a tutor for that class. Oh, he will be, yes, also in the fall. He's going to be also the course coordinator for that class as well. So that's it for today. And so good luck with your final assignments. I look forward to your videos. I hope that some of you will apply for the internship. And please, if you have any questions or anything you'd like to chat with me, do drop me a line. I'll be happy to see you. All right. All right then. So goodbye.
Goodbye, students. Bye.
Hello. I think I have to say some things. I thank you for all your teaching, and I think I have to do a lot of self-reflective during this course, and maybe I will keep that light in my heart shining. Okay. Bye-bye.
Great.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. And
Yeah.
thanks for all your help, Wang Sunan. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
Hi, Professor Farmer.
Hi.
Yeah,
Feifei. Yeah.
I just want to tell you that this course really deprogrammed me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, as you said, at the first course, as the first lesson, you said this course will. Actually, I don't think at that time. Now I agree.
So tell me more. Yeah, tell me more.
Because I'm a science student
Yeah.
and study biology. Before I take this course, I'm an atheist.
Yeah.
And now I understand more about religious and philosopher and some lifestyle in
Mhm.
Taoism and so on.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I hope that, so I hope that this will like open you to really start thinking about things from a different, from a different perspective, and yeah, getting new inspirations, and yeah, and tending to that little light in your heart.
Yeah. Actually, 2 weeks ago, I choose the religions and the science, that's CC course in my shopping basket.
Okay, right.
Yeah,
Oh,
so it's really surprised as the
Okay.
professor is you.
Yeah. I'm sure as a biology student, you'll find it really interesting. Yeah. And probably some of the, in this course, some of the kind of methodological and philosophical question that in this course are a little blurry, a little not clear, but in that course it would be very, very clear. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be very helpful for you as a science student who's interested in religion. Yeah.
We'll be there.
All right, great. I look forward to seeing you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hi, Professor Palmer. So I'm a mathematics student, and actually I'm very interested in your course. Yes, and as this course reminds me of something I've read before this course, which is some books from the New Age movement. So actually, I'm not sure whether that book you have heard of. That book is called A Course in Miracle.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about it.
Oh, I see. I'm just wondering about what might be your opinion about the relation between like New Age movement and Baha'i religion.
Yeah, okay. Some aspects of the New Age movement are similar to the Baha'i faith, and one of them is that basically the idea that right, that you can find the truth in all the different spiritual and religious traditions, right? So that's quite common in the, that's pretty foundational in the New Age movement, and basically the Baha'i faith also has that idea. And so the open-mindedness of the New Age movement and the Baha'i faith is pretty much is similar. Also, the New Age movement, at least originally, although now it's maybe not as strong, but there used to be the idea when the New Age movement began in North America in the 1970s, that we were going to enter this new age, right? That's why it's called a new age, and it would be an era of planetary unity. And actually the New Age, that idea was also partly influenced by Teilhard de Chardin, whom I talked about in one of my essays. So there was this kind of utopian idea in the New Age movement, but now the New Age movement has become very commercialized, and they don't really talk about it that much anymore. It's much more commercialized, and that's actually one of the main differences between the Baha'i faith and the New Age movement. So that's why I don't really agree with the commercialization. This is one difference. So the Baha'i faith is based on service, not on commercializing religion. And the other thing is, a lot of New Age practices are really very, actually really interested in experiencing things, right? So you want to, right, you want to have miracles in your life, and you want to experience, you know, through meditation or various practices, you want to experience things in your body, experience things in your mindscape, and you want to have all these different kinds of experiences. But from a Baha'i perspective, maybe that's, you know, maybe some of these experiences exist, but the experience itself is not the truth. And so the focus in the Baha'i faith is, it's about how to, through our religious faith, how to develop our virtues. So in the way that we behave with others, and how to build community. That's really the main focus. So then, of course, some Baha'is, they go to various meditation, or they do various New Age things, and some Baha'is don't. But that's not central, like, or crystals and these kinds of things. Baha'is aren't, I mean, maybe some Baha'is would do it, but it's not part of the Baha'i faith. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
I thank you very much. And by the way, I'm thinking about, so you talk about that Baha'i don't focus on like the experiences, or this is not the main focus, about building communities and other stuff. So
yeah.
this reminds me of the collective enchantment, which is also discussed in this course.
Yes.
When I think about this, I think something interesting is that I feel like that collective enchantment somehow is a kind of art. And
a kind of art.
So, in some senses, there's ingredients of art. I'm just thinking about, so another question I would like to ask is about what's the role of art plays in such spirituality cultivations? Because I feel like that I can understand like such kind of collective enchantments as a way of doing arts, and also like in other religious traditions like Buddhism, like they consider the Fa Hua Jing to be one of the most important classics, because Fa Hua Jing somehow emphasizes more on the artistic ingredients of Buddhism compared to like Lin Yan Jing or other classics like Ah Han Jing or something like that. So I feel like I'm wondering, so I would like to hear, so may I know something from you about what you think about the how what's the role of art and how it interacts with religions in spirituality?
Right. Well, actually, well, in a sense, first of all, so art is the external manifestation of the soul, or the external manifestation of the mindscape in some way. So it reflects a spiritual state, right? And art is also a transformation, right? So it's a way of transforming matter according to a spiritual state. So actually, art is profoundly spiritual in a sense. And so many artists, they have a intuition, right? They have a higher level of intuition of spiritual realities. They have a kind of sense, right? And so this then shows up in the more rich and vivid imagination. And then this then can find expression externally through art. And so that process of artistic creation is really, in some ways, a beautiful illustration of the essence, maybe, of spirituality and religion, right? And in fact, maybe from a Baha'i perspective, you know, our life should be a work of art, and our community should be a work of art, right? It's like you want to bring into this world something that is from another world, right? Which is what an artist is doing. And then you could see from an artist, you can see the spiritual state. So some forms of contemporary art are like, you could see the low spiritual, or the, you know, dirty or messed up mindscape. Right? Like, you know, I went to the Tate Modern Gallery in London, and there was this huge piece of shit, like a sculpture that was like as big as a bus, and it represented human excrement, right? So the artist spent like 10 years making this sculpture of like the dirty things, right? But maybe there's something profound there, right? But also it reflects, whereas, right, you look at some, think about how during the Middle Ages or ancient times when people were very, very poor, and yet they devoted, they were able to create such sublime beauty through religious art, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think that's really a beautiful course somehow.
Yeah.
Have a nice day.
Okay, thank you for your questions. Nice meeting you. Fang Chunning. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, all right, bye-bye.
Always, yeah, we get it done. Great.
All right, so there we are. So only one more class this afternoon.
Great.
Thanks so much, Steve, for everything.
I also enjoy it. I enjoy this. Like this year, I think some students are very engaged. I mean, comparing it to the previous years. Well, of course, we always have some students who just want to get a grade. Well, definitely they are there. But somehow I find it this year students really, I quite enjoy the teaching this semester in our course.
Excellent. I'm so glad to hear that. For me, I have a hard time knowing, because just talking to the screen and usually only, right, Tom and a few others showing their faces. Right. So I just wonder. So it's been frustrating at that level, but the creation of writing the blogs and everything has been, I've really enjoyed that. And also the fact that we didn't have the field trip. So I really worry that the students lack I think the field trips are so special. So I'm so glad to hear from you that the students are very engaged that.
But to be honest, I think maybe even in the coming semester, we may not really organize the field trips. It's still very difficult to do that.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Well, I'm really glad if even without the field trips, you can find that they're engaged, and hopefully we'll have more face-to-face next semester, which could lead more engagement. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Okay.
See you in an hour. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks a lot. See you later.